Denmark has just closed its government investigation into Jehovah's Witnesses. But the Minister of Church Affairs came out swinging with a message that could reshape everything. And he said, I have no sympathy for Jehovah's Witnesses. He has no sympathy for Jehovah's Witnesses. And he says, I'm open to changing the law. Well, today I'm going to break this down, what it means, what was investigated and what wasn't, and why Denmark may be preparing to tighten their laws in a way that could affect Jehovah's Witnesses nationwide. But first, we need to talk about the source behind all of this. The article I'm about to read comes from Ekstra Bladet, one of Denmark's biggest and oldest national newspapers, going back to 1904. And they're not a blog, they're not a tabloid rumor mill. They're a major investigative outlet, and the kind of outlet that exposes political scandals, institutional failures, and abuse of power. And here's the important part. Ekstra Bladet is the reason Denmark opened this investigation into Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place. They published multiple investigative reports. We're going to take a look at them. Links to all of them, or a lot of them, at the end of the article we're about to read. Now, they publish multiple investigative reports, testimonies from former Jehovah's Witnesses, stories of intimate partner violation and not reported to the police, shunning and psychological isolation, criticism from psychologists, leaked elders' book policies, and major concerns about how JWs handle crimes involving children. Now, their reporting created enough public and political pressure that the Ministry of Church Affairs had no choice but to launch a supervisory case. So, before we get into the article, here's what you need to understand. The Danish government didn't just wake up one morning and decide to investigate Jehovah's Witnesses. The entire case, the review, the documents, and the minister's statements, all of it began because journalists exposed serious concerns, and ordinary former members stepped forward with their stories. And today's article is Ekstra Bladet's follow-up on how the government responded, the government of Denmark, how they responded. Okay, we're going to get right into the article. This is Ekstra Bladet, November 24th, 2025. And the title is The Ministry Closes Supervisory Case Against Jehovah's Witnesses. ... I have no sympathy for them. Jehovah's Witnesses are no longer under strict supervision. However, a document review shows that the Ministry of Church Affairs has not looked into whether Jehovah's Witnesses practice psychological violence, even though several former members and experts believe that this is the case. Morten Dahlen therefore makes a clear appeal to former and current members of Jehovah's Witnesses. So here's a picture of the hall, and underneath it says that the Minister of Church Affairs emphasizes that he has no sympathy for Jehovah's Witnesses. And the article goes on to read, for more than a year, Jehovah's Witnesses have been under increased supervision by the Ministry of Church Affairs. Now the case is closed, and the recognized religious community can breathe a sigh of relief. The ministry concludes that Jehovah's Witnesses do not violate Danish law, at least not in relation to intimate partner violence or child abuse. Intimate partner violence. This is apparent from a request for access to documents that Ekstra Bladet had in its possession. A letter from the ministry to Jehovah's Witnesses states, among other things, it is the ministry's overall assessment that your material does not contain descriptions of actions or omissions that are contrary or encourage the breaking of Danish law, including descriptions of handling violence or practices if the religious community or its leadership becomes aware of crimes against children. And it goes on to read, the inspection was initiated based on articles in Ekstra Bladet about Jehovah's Witnesses last year. However, the access to the documents shows that the ministry has only taken 2 of these articles as a starting point. And thus the ministry has not addressed the many other revelations that Ekstra Bladet had brought about critical conditions within the religious community. And here's a supervisory case. It has only focused on intimate partner violence and abuse against children. This is because, among other things, Ekstra Bladet published an article which a woman said that she was subjected to violence by her husband when she was a member of Jehovah's Witnesses, and that she was encouraged by the elders in the congregation not to report it. And the second article deals with the Secret Elders Book of Jehovah's Witnesses, which states how the elders should deal with offenses in the congregation. And the supervisory case has examined internal documents at Jehovah's Witnesses and assessed that the principles are consistent with Danish legislation on intimate partner violence and child abuse. And the assessments has been carried out by professionals. Psychological violence, that's the next section here. Among other things, a child psychologist called Jehovah's Witnesses cartoons for children deeply shocking and worrying. The cartoons, Caleb and Sophie. Yes. So the psychologist Suzanne Benderfelt also criticized Jehovah's Witnesses and called their exclusion principles psychological violence. In addition, several former witnesses have told their stories to Ekstra Bladet about what it was like to be ostracized by their family because of the rules of the religious community. And I would go on to elaborate and say what it was like, what it is like, because the ostracism, the disfellowshipping, the shunning, it doesn't go away. If you're a Jehovah's Witness, ex-Jehovah's Witness out there, you know that it lasts forever. Every day you're being shunned. So that's why it's psychological violence. So yet the ministry has not considered that these matters should be investigated in the supervisory case that has been filed in that one. This is confirmed by the Minister of Church Affairs, Morton Dolan, to the Ekstra Bladet. Dolan says, what the supervision case has raised has been about crimes against children and handling of intimate partner violence. So in connection with the supervision case, the Minister of Church Affairs has himself received a number of inquiries from people associated with Jehovah's Witnesses who have wanted to draw his attention to various problems within the religious community. And Dolan also says, I have no sympathy for Jehovah's Witnesses. I would like to emphasize that, period. We just have to remember that it is not the Ministry of Church Affairs that assesses whether someone has been subjected to psychological violence. He goes on to say here, it's the police. It's the police. And I can see from the stories I have received that there are many who believe that they have been subjected to it. And I have no reason to doubt the statements I have heard. I think they seem very credible, says Dolan. And he therefore makes a clear call, even if half of the stories I have contacted with are true, then we should report them so the police can investigate them. And then we have the opportunity to subsequently look at the recognition of the religious community. So I'd like to encourage you to report it if you have been exposed to something in Jehovah's Witnesses, he says. And the article continues after this picture. Here's a picture of Dolan. That's the picture we used on our thumbnail. And Dolan himself, he has not been part of the supervisory investigation. The supervisory investigation was carried out by professionals. Now, we're going to carry on in this article. It says the positive towards changing the law. I think this is the most important part of the article. It goes on to say the minister also says that the whole case about Jehovah's Witnesses has made a big impression and that he has therefore also found an opportunity to look at Religious Communities Act in general. And this has, of course, made me consider whether our legislation is strong enough today. Does our legislation have the right tools to be able to take recognition away from religious communities in cases where something wrong is happening? And I would like to be positive about the changing the legislation, it says. And in connection with the case, the many inquiries and personal accounts have made an impression on the minister. The people who have contacted me have told me stories that I think are incompatible with fundamental Danish values. I have no other desire than to eliminate religious extremism, but this requires that some charges are brought and some sentences are handed down, the minister emphasizes. Ekstra Bladet has reached out to Jehovah's Witnesses in connection with the closure of the case, but they have not returned the inquiry before the article's publication. And here's some more articles you can read on Ekstra Bladet. I was reading a few. There was one there where they went right into the Kingdom Hall, meeting with Jehovah's Witnesses. The world is ruled by Satan. And that's how they opened the prayer in the Kingdom Hall. It was interesting. But anyways, I'll leave this with you folks, and we'll carry on with some commentary on what's happening. So that's the article, and now we need to talk about what's really going on here, because the headlines don't really tell the whole story. Denmark may have closed this investigation, but based on the minister's own words, the story isn't ending, it's beginning. Let's break this down. So let's talk about what we just read, because the headlines might give the impression that Denmark cleared Jehovah's Witnesses of wrongdoing. But that's not what's happened. The ministry only investigated two things: intimate partner violence and child abuse. And only in the limited documents they chose to review. They did not investigate psychological violence, shunning, coercive control, isolation, the mental health impact on children, the effects of cutting off family and members, or the broader patterns that experts have been warning about. And the minister openly admits it. And this is the line that changes everything. Does our legislation have the right tools to take recognition away from the religious communities when something wrong is happening? And he goes on to say, I'm positive about changing the law. That's massive. That is a government minister publicly saying our laws might not be strong enough to deal with this. This is not a defense of Jehovah's Witnesses, folks. And this is not approval of their practices. This is Denmark saying we need better laws so next time we can act. And this is exactly what just happened in Norway. Norway tried to act under their existing laws. They deregistered Jehovah's Witnesses, pulled their state funding. But when it went to court, in the appeals, the court said your laws don't clearly define psychological violence or social isolation. You don't have a strong enough legal basis. So the JWs won the appeal. Not because the behavior wasn't harmful, not because shunning isn't real, and not because people weren't hurt, but because the law was outdated. And this is the danger Denmark is trying to avoid right now. Imagine all the legal bills they could save right now by fixing their laws, not going to court early and losing and having to pay all the legal costs. That's not what they want to do. They learned from Norway's mistake. So the Danish minister is looking at Norway and saying, we're not going to make the same mistake. We're going to fix the law first, because you can't go after harmful practices with a blunt instrument. You can't win in court with vague definitions. Psychological abuse has to be written into the law in a way that stands up in the legal system. And the minister isn't even hiding his thoughts. He literally said, I have no sympathy for Jehovah's Witnesses. I have no sympathy for them. And that is a rare honesty from a politician. So this all matters, folks. Look, government actions have to survive the courts. If the law isn't strong enough, the courts will overturn everything. So Denmark is doing the smart thing. They're closing the narrow investigation. They admit the limitations. They're listening to stories, asking for more stories, and they begin looking at legal reform. Because once the law is clarified and once psychological violence is defined and once coercive control is codified, then you can act. Then you can win in court. And then you can hold religious organizations accountable. And did you catch the minister's call? He said, even if half of the stories are true, report them to the police. And that's not a polite suggestion. That is a government telling XJWs, your stories matter. We believe you, and we need your case documents so we can act. That's huge. So don't read this article as Denmark defending Jehovah's Witnesses. Read it as Denmark is preparing to strengthen the law, so next time they won't walk away. Well, folks, this is the beginning of a larger conversation in Europe about coercive control, shunning, and psychological violence. And this time, the people affected by it, their voices are finally being heard. So, folks, live your life with love. We'll see you on the next video. My name is Vern. This is Fixing My Faith. Bye for now. Well, before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to thank our Coffee Club supporters. These are the folks who help keep Fixing My Faith going. And I'm scrolling through them right now. And if you see your name, thank you for standing with us. But here's the thing. The best way you can support us is absolutely free. Over almost 60% of our viewers are not subscribed. So if you've been watching and getting value out of these videos, hitting that subscribe button tells YouTube to share this with more people who need it. So subscribe, like, and share. And we also run a completely free community. It's called xjwfriends.com. That's where you can find it on the website, xjwfriends.com. And then on the website, once you go there, there's a link to the private Discord channel. And that's where people have a lot of fun. People share their stories, they get support, and they can connect without judgment. That's what happens there. There's also people that will help coach, life coaches, counselors. There's all kinds of support at XJW Friends. And if you're waking up or just need to talk it out, that's where you want to go. So here's a link on screen in case you want to find it. And we also put a link in the descriptions of all of our videos. You can just go right down there and hit the link to the Discord community. So whether you are supporting through the Coffee Club or just clicking, liking, and subscribing, it all helps spread the message. And we want you to know that we appreciate you. Live your life with love, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.